There's nothing more important in NBA DFS than late swapping, and that's why we have the late swap tool here at Stokastic to help optimize your process. And in this video, I'm going to show you how it works. So do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any questions for me at all, let me know down below in the YouTube comments so I can check those out and respond. If you are a Stokastic sub, join our Discord channel that comes with access to all of our packages. And we also have people in there that you could ask questions to about the tools, about strategy, or anything else that's on your mind about DFS. But what you're going to want to do here is make sure you have the right site selected that you're playing on, and then also the correct slate it is that you're trying to late swap lineups for, and then grab your lineup file, either from whatever site it is you're playing on, DraftKings, FanDuel, Owner's Box. Simply select that lineup file and attach it here, and then you're good to move on to the next page. On the next page here, you are going to see that we have a couple of different options you could select. One of the things here include that you could either select a live contest pool, which is what I do recommend you do, because this is actually going to take into account the live ownerships of the players who have already locked. But if you wanted to, you could also upload your own custom pool. But if you're somebody who just wants to not build out your own pool and you want to just use the actual lineups that are already in play on DraftKings, FanDuel, Owner's Box, wherever it is, then go ahead and have the select live contest selected, and then select the contest you are actually going to be building and simulating out lineups for. So this contest here on DraftKings for opening day, it is a $750,000 prize pool, and it has 200,000 going to first place. So when you select the percentage payout to first, you would simply divide 200,000 by 750,000, which equals to 26%. 25% is the number in here that is closest to 26%. So I'm going to select 25%. And then also for pool size, you want this to be as close as possible to the amount of entries in the contest. So this contest on DraftKings, it has tens of thousands of entries. So I'm going to have the 50,000 pool size selected. We also have the swappable lineup profile. So if you want to have your lineups be on the chalkier side, you could press chalky. If you want to try to late swap to more contrarian lineups, you could go with contrarian. You could also get a balance between the two. If you go between balance, chalky, contrarian, we've got one right in the middle. But you could also have them lean a little bit more one way or the other without it being all the way in the chalky or all the way in the contrarian section. I'm going to start here just by having it on balance. That is what I use more often than not. The next thing you do is press View Live Pool. This is going to show you our live ownership projections, which includes the actual ownership of the players who have already started. And then you go to Review Projections. So now if you are somebody who likes to upload your own projections, you could do that right here in the same way that you do in the regular Sims tool. You could upload your own custom projections. Just upload a file that has the columns player name, projection, ownership, upload it, and all of this will be updated to what it is you have projected for the players. It is not necessary. If you want to just use our existing projections, that is totally fine. You do not have to upload your own projections. One other thing that I like to use for the late swap is the variance. For me in particular, where I like to use the most is when players' games have already finished. So let's say, for instance, that SGA in the OKC Houston game was already over, and we already knew for sure that he had 58 fantasy points. What I would do is I would have 58 fantasy points for SGA, and I would change the variance to 0, because that would mean on every sim run, he scores exactly 58 fantasy points, because that outcome has already been determined. We already know that's how many fantasy points that SGA has because the game has ended. So that is a way that you could use the variance and get yourselves a little bit more accurate of Sims runs when you're using the late swap tool. Once again, variance, not necessary, but it is something that you could use if you wanted to. If you want to also make it so that players have a wider range of outcomes in the sim runs, you could up the variance by adding numbers to it. If you want to make the players' outcomes in the simulations more close to what their actual fantasy point projection is, you could also downgrade the amount of variance in players. We have the standard set at 1 for every player. Once again, you don't have to make those changes, but if you want to, you certainly could. Then the next thing you would do is you press Run Contest Simulation. And now what's happening here? Very, very similar to what happens in the contest generator and the pre-contest sims. What we're doing here is all of the lineups that you've already built out and the lineups you've already uploaded to DraftKings, FanDuel, Owner's Box, wherever you're playing, those lineups are all being simulated against each other, as well as a bunch of lineups that are being generated based on potential swappable lineups. So it's not just the lineups that you already have in play, but also lineups that could possibly be swapped too. Those are also being simulated against each other to determine what possible lineups you could change to are actually the highest best ROI lineups that you could possibly be playing. So now, after you have all this done, the simulation has been finished, you can now late swap to some other lineup. So you could quick favorite here, and you could favorite top ROI swap lineups here. And you'll see that of the lineups that I had just uploaded a set of 20 lineups here. 12 out of the 20 of them were swapped. And then you could also go in and see what actual changes were made in the exposures here. So you could see that we have these players were the ones who were swapped out of the most lineups. So the exposure change, negative 25%. Previously in this set of lineups, I had 35% of Gary Payton. Now I have 10% of Gary Payton. And you could also look at the positive exposure changes to see which players we got more of. So here, for instance, started with 35% of Austin Reeves. We now have 50% of Austin Reeves. However, just the same way that you do in the pre-contest sims, you can also do ROI boosts. So let's say you want to have more or less of any individual players in here, you could do that. If you don't want to have 65% of DeAndre Ayton, you can give him a negative 20% ROI boost. Then you go back, unfavorite your lineups, refavorite your top lineups, and now you'll see that we should now have less exposure to DeAndre Ayton. So we went from having 65% of Ayton, and now he is only in 40% of lineups. So we got to less of him by doing that. So if you want to control either by getting more or less of an individual player, you could certainly do that. You could also go into your exposure caps, and you could hard cap a player. So right here, we've got 45% of Draymond Green. Maybe you only want 35% of him and no more. You could set Draymond Green to 35%, set exposure into just favorites. And now in our exposures, we should have 35% of Draymond Green. So that's a way that you can manually cap the exposure of any individual player. And then once you're done with this process and you're comfortable with all of your exposures, simply press export favorites. And that is going to create a CSV for you of the lineups that were already favored in here. And then all you have to do is re-upload those to DraftKings, FanDuel, Owner's Box, wherever you're playing, and your lineups are good to go. If you've got any questions about this at all, this is a super simple tool to use, but probably the most powerful tool we have on the site for increasing your ROI because of how important late swap is to NBA. Once again, got any questions, let me know in Discord or leave a question down below in the YouTube comments. Other than that, good luck this season, guys. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel.